I want to welcome you to this field event sponsored by the Field Advisory Committee. And it is a focus on beginning conversation about safety in the field for students. For those of you that may not have met me yet, I'm Terry Haven, the Field Education Director. And as I said, I'm here representing the Field Advisory Committee. Our Field Advisory Committee is comprised of faculty member representatives from both the BSW and MSW program, and also our community partners. So we have field instructors who are out working with you, who are also part of our Field Advisory Committee. And this group's come together to really begin a process to talk to you about safety in the field and how do we think about that. And we tend to think of it as safety-informed practice. So I want to introduce to you our primary speaker for the night, Doug Foresta, and tell you just a little bit about Doug. Doug is a clinical social worker. He's currently in private practice in Chicopee, Mass. And prior to this, Doug spent 10 years, first as a social worker and then as a supervisor with the Department of Children and Families. Doug was on the committee to form the very first statewide safety conference for the Department of Children and Families. And for several years, he was also the safety co-chair for one of the local area offices here in Springfield. Over the past 4 years, Doug has presented over 200 conferences and workshops and keynote presentations throughout the United States and Europe that are focused on the topics of wellness and resilience. Doug is also one of the leading therapists in an online website called TalkTala.com, which is a partner in Huffington Post Soul application. He's also a blogger for psychotherapy.net. Doug is the producer and host of the show Creating Change on Empower Radio, which is dedicated to the power of creativity to create personal and social change. It is my pleasure to welcome Doug. Doug is also a member of our Field Advisory Committee, and we feel very blessed for that. So, Doug, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. And I'm very excited to be here with you and to talk about safety-informed practice. And what I want to start with, we're going to talk about is why I believe all social work practice really needs to be safety-informed practice. And I just want to say a few words about the importance of safety and what safety is. And I'm going to set some ground rules in a minute because I want this training itself to model what safety in social work is. But just to say that I want to say also that this is safety as a part of wellness that contributes to worker resilience and that needs to be part of all social work practice. So that's going to be part of the theme tonight, is certainly about that safety needs to be a part of all social work practice. It's not just something that we do when we have time. It is an important infused part of social work practice. And we're going to present an overview of key considerations. And also I want to say, this is the beginning of the conversation. It's not the end of the conversation. Our time will be relatively short compared to all that we could say about safety. The idea here is to get the conversation started because it's so important to have the conversation about safety. And I'm going to set this up, but I want to start with why I think this is so important and just a little, sort of my own little way of thinking about the importance of safety in social work. Now, I first want to set up to say, who here has seen the 1978 Christopher Reeve Superman movie? Anybody seen it? Okay, so quite a few people have seen it. So I just want to make sure, the beginning of this clip is a little bit, could be activating for some people. This is a scene where it's the first time I believe that we actually see Superman as Superman, and he saves Lois Lane. So I want to make sure, I'm starting this clip off, it's kind of, like I said, I want to make sure that we actually all are safe, but what I love about this clip is the payoff. But the beginning is Lois Lane is in peril. So many of you probably have seen this, but I just want to set up to say, we all know that Superman saves Lois Lane. So she'll be okay. She's going to be all right. And I want to set this up as sort of to make a point about the importance of safety in social work. So I'm going to move on to this next clip now. And like I said, when it starts, it's going to start right away. And it'll go right into, this is where, just setting this up, Lois Lane was doing some investigative reporting, and her helicopter crashes, and she's in peril. And this is, again, this is the first time that we've actually seen Superman.
All right, let's get back to the back on the street. Come on, bring the cameras over here. Okay, get us. Okay, you see All right, come on, let's move back. Let the ambulance. Let these family get in here. Come on, hold it. Get back. Come on, get off the street. Come on, get back. Move, fireman's room, boys. Come on now, make a line. The other side of the street. Come on, get them off. Come on. Get away from the side of the building. Hold these guys back.
Help me!
Excuse me.
That's a bad outfit.
Okay, Breslau, move these people out. Come on, look up there.
How's that?
Easy, miss. I've got you.
You've got me. Who's got you?
I can't believe it. I just cannot believe it. He got her.
Gentlemen, this man needs help. Well, I certainly hope this little incident hasn't put you off flying, miss. Statistically speaking, of course, it's still the safest way to travel.
Right.
Wait!
Who are you?
A friend.
So why do I show that clip? I call this the Who's Got You moment. So I love that scene, and I share that a lot of times when I teach or when I'm talking to social workers. And I just, that moment where Lois Lane is falling, right? And Superman swoops her up and he goes, "I've got you," right? And she goes, "But who's got you?" And one of the things that we need to realize as social workers is that, first of all, anyone here believe that they are Superman or Superwoman? No, right? Right. So, who's got you? That's sort of the question that I'm going to pose to all of you thinking about this tonight is, who's got you? Because we are not Superman and we are not Superwoman. And if we try to be, we're going to burn ourselves out. So what's really important tonight is, like I said, that this is really about self-care, and we'll talk about, obviously, we're going to talk about safety, and we're going to talk about wellness as part of that as well. But I really just want to pose that to you, the idea of, who's got you, that we should be thinking about that as social workers. That we, you know, Superman, it works well for Superman. He doesn't need any support, but we do. And this is the piece here that, you know, good social work practice is about reaching out and collaboration. And I just wanted to say a word here as well about, I don't know if anyone's ever familiar with the book A General Theory of Love by Thomas Lewis. Has anybody ever heard of it? Yeah. So Thomas Lewis is a psychiatrist. He wrote a book, it's about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, called The General Theory of Love. And in this book, one of the things they talk about is really researching what love is. And one of the things that they talked about, what really interesting, was that if you take somebody and they move their hand like this, that if you watch me, all of you watching me do this, then at some level, the neurons in your brain are also doing this, just as if you were moving your hand. And those are called mirror neurons. I don't know if anyone ever heard of this, mirror neurons. So basically what he found is that the idea is that basically we are all connected. And we all, you know, what other people do affects us. And so it's really important that we use collaboration, that social work, you know, we should not be doing, again, this goes to the piece about who's got you. We should not be doing social work in isolation. And if we start doing social work in isolation, then we need to pause and reflect and think about what we're doing. And so even all of you being here tonight and being part of this conversation is a really important piece of safety, is being connected, and like I said, that we need others. With that, I want to say a little bit about some ground rules pretty quickly now that we're going to model in this training the importance of taking care of ourselves. And so one of the things that I'm going to do, part of my job, and I am a therapist too, using my other hat. So part of my job is to make sure that everybody here is taking care of themselves tonight. And I always say to my clients, you know, I don't ever want to have somebody leave feeling worse than when they came in, right? So we want to make this a positive experience for you. This is about safety, and you know, my goal is that when you leave tonight, that you leave here on a positive note, and you leave here, you know, feeling safe. So if anyone at any point, first of all, like I said, safety is more than physical safety, right? So we're talking about emotional safety, right? Probably the chances are, in this moment, right, we're physically safe, but I'm talking about emotional safety. So that if stuff comes up for people as we're talking about things, and we're going to be talking about field, and somebody feels like they just feel really activated, then I want you to just go ahead and catch. Terry is going to be, she's expert in trauma, and so you have a world-class trauma expert here in the room. So take advantage of that, and so you can go ahead and, you know, and just catch Terry's attention, and she'll go ahead and take you out of the room and talk to you. So we want to give you an opportunity that if stuff comes up, that you have a place to process that. But my job is to make sure that it doesn't also devolve into, I don't know if anyone's ever had this experience, being at a safety training and it just becomes war story after war story, and you end up leaving feeling like, oh my God, I didn't know I had to be afraid of that too, right? So we don't want that, right? We want to model what safety is. So we want this to be a safe experience. And let's share, like I said, let's share with an emphasis on safety and well-being. And so part of my job is, you know, if I feel like someone's going into trauma sharing, my job is going to be to gently redirect you and ask you to, you know, to use the support that's here. But again, I don't want to, I want to make this, I want to model this as a positive experience about safety. Here's the other piece. We can't cover it all, right? So I just want to say that there was I think it was like the 15th century. There was a rabbi. His name was Rabbi Hillel, and somebody said, you know, can you tell me everything about Jewish law while standing on one foot? I can't teach you everything about safety tonight, nor do I know everything about safety, right? That would be impossible. Safety is an ongoing dialogue and conversation. And we're not going to be able to cover everything about safety tonight. So today, so when you leave here, you're not going to, you know, we don't want to leave here saying you're done. You know, good news, you're all safe. And you can say, I went to the training, right? That's it. I went to the training. I went to the safety training. I'm good. We want this to be the beginning of the conversation. We want this, you know, we want you to understand that, again, safety-informed practice, that we're always doing work that is about all of social work is about safety. And I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, about why I think safety is the most important piece of what we do. Let me just say a little bit, too, that there has been an increased awareness of social worker safety, much more so. You know, I started in this field in 2002, and even from there, I noticed a lot of differences in the field. But just to say that there are now NASW, National Association of Social Worker recommendations for social worker safety. Westfield State is actively collaborating with field placement sites. There is a huge amount of awareness. We have, you know, on the Field Advisory Committee, we have members from community agencies, and there's a tremendous amount of awareness now about how many people have had this conversation about safety in a placement or in some way. Yeah, good. And that there's increased research and focus on worker and workplace resilience, again, of which safety is a part. So safety is not just, do you make it home at the end of the day? Safety is also about, what do you look like when you get home, right?
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
Just to make contact people, because I was able to access it last year.
Yeah.
Do you know the name? There's an organization that's set up for people in our field and educators and other folks that if you need counseling or safety assurance, you can get free counseling sessions.
Oh, I'm not aware of what that is. Do you know?
I'll get the name for folks later. It's
Okay.
an awesome organization. It's actually a nationwide initiative, and so you can call them.
That's
get
great.
free appointments.
Great. And we're also going to talk about, you know, the things that are available to you here at Westfield as well, but that's a great, thank you. That's a great resource. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So here's a question for you that I want to pose to you as a beginning of the discussion. What is safety-informed social work practice? When you see the term safety-informed social work practice, what would that look like? What does that mean? Sounds good, but what would that mean? Anybody have any ideas? Well, let me ask you this. Does anybody have any thoughts about what the idea of what safety in social work is in general? I know we said a little bit, but what does safety mean? Yes.
Hi, I'm Danielle.
Hi, Danielle.
I guess a few things that come to mind are depending on what kind of setting you're in, ensuring your physical safety.
Right.
Seems kind of obvious. And then also guaranteeing your emotional safety.
So right. So you said physical safety, making sure you're physically safe, and then you said an emotional safety.
Yeah, and kind of understanding your role in maintaining your own wellness.
Right.
That you can.
So what would that look like? So let's take that and make that, you know, something actionable. What would that look like? Yes.
To make sure, like you said earlier, that not only do you get home at the end of the night, but you're not just completely drained every single night all the time.
Right.
Because that we can go out, leave work at work and go and enjoy things outside of work.
Sure, absolutely. You know, I was thinking about this the other day that I love social work. I love being a social worker. And I want to be a social worker as long as I can be a social worker. And so part of sustaining a career, right? Part of sustaining a career. How many people here actually would like to be employed as a social worker at some point? All right, good choice. You know, that exactly, that sustainability. So I'm curious, any other thoughts about what that looks like, what safety-informed social work practice would look like? Yes.
So you know what your protocols are, where can you go
Yes.
in the field, what do you wear, who you call,
Yes.
how do they know where you are,
Yes.
do cell phones work out there?
So having protocols, right, is what you're talking about, having some type of protocols. And yes, absolutely, we're going to talk about that as well. That's really important, right? That people have a sense of, well, what do I do? We can't anticipate every situation, but many situations we can, right? There are many things that we can anticipate, and it's good to have some protocols. Yes?
What about finding outlets for, emotional stress, any issues that we may be dealing with? So if the agency doesn't provide like supervision or something like that, find therapists that you can talk to aside from that, and just kind of resolve some issues. And just maybe even knowing yourself, knowing your limitations, and challenge yourself to move forward with that stuff.
Absolutely right. That we need to have, and that's the who's got you, right? That really is the who's got you. You know, that we it's okay to have. Not only is it okay, we need to have other people behind us, right? So you're talking about, so what you're saying is having either, whether it's through supervision or if it's beyond that, having, going into our own therapy to help support us emotionally, right? Yeah, great. Those are great ones. Anything else? Anybody else have some other thoughts about what safety-informed social practice? Yes?
Setting clear boundaries.
Yes.
And with our clients.
Yes. So setting clear boundaries. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really important one. I just to say a little bit about, I do work with, I moderate forums online. These are therapeutic conversations. They're actually an application in the Huffington Post, and they're also online through through other places. So I literally work with people from all over the world, and I literally could be doing it 24/7. It never stops. These are people from all over the world. So if I didn't set boundaries for myself, I could just be listening to people all day long, right? But at some point, I have to know when to stop, right? Because I'm not Superman. So I think that's great. Boundaries is a really important piece, absolutely. What else? Any other? Take a couple more, and then anyone else? You guys have some great. Yes?
Social supports and family supports.
Absolutely right. Beyond just professional support, but really having social support. Yes, yes. And going back for a moment, just to talk about general theory of love and what one of the things that's really clear is that we see that, for example, people that have pets, right, have lower blood pressure and have better outcomes after surgery than people that don't have pets. Being connected, right, that piece about being connected and feeling connected in meaningful ways, personally as well as professionally, is definitely very important. Absolutely. One other. Anybody else want to? You can take one more before. Anybody else? So what I want to say here is I want to also say, this is the piece I said about how I think safety is one of the most important things, that we can't do much else beyond it. And I just want to share with you, is anybody familiar with this, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Does this look familiar to anyone? Yes, okay. So we think about, Maslow was a psychologist, and he was a humanistic psychologist, and he came up with this idea that there are a hierarchy of needs, and that we have, in order to get to these higher level of needs, we need to make sure that we have these base, he made this as a pyramid, that we need to get these base needs first. And so we think about, for example, so the base is physiological: breathing, food, water, sex, sleep, homeostasis, excretion. So what happens if these physiological needs are not met? So think about, for example, in people that you work with, or people that you will work with. So if somebody comes in, I'll give you an example. I've certainly had this happen when I was working in community mental health, and somebody would come in for therapy, and then they would say, I don't know where I'm going to live tonight. I have no idea where I'm going to live, right? And then if I said, well, tell me more about your mother, right? Say, my mother doesn't have a place to live either, right? So we have to make sure that these physiological needs are met. And then what they call safety, security of body, employment, resources, morality, and then we can get to love, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. A lot of the work that we do as social workers, we get really excited, of course, about doing this work, right? Helping people self-actualize, doing the work of love, right? But if we don't meet our own basic physiological and safety needs, and I would really argue that physiological needs are safety needs, right? Like if you can't breathe, are you safe? No, right? So physiological, making sure that we have to make sure that we take care of this base, or else, again, that's the thing about, who's got you. Did you want to say something? Yes.
Yeah, I see your point, and I see the basis, but so I see lack of practices at the way top. For some people, getting access to food and water and shelter is impeded by prejudice.
Oh, I agree with you. And Maslow wasn't a social worker, right? So this probably reflects that.
Family, security of employment, security of family, of health, is affected. So the idea of a pyramid and a hierarchy of these things, I mean, I understand that, physiological things are the most basic. But how do you take into consideration that in order to reach the most basic ideas, what he's putting at the top ideas are necessary?
Well, I agree with you that it's not, one of the things I always say when I teach this is that, this is not supposed to be a rigid, a rigid ladder. But I agree with you. I think that's a very good point, that prejudice, right, is something that could also contribute in terms of safety, right? For example, access, right? Can people physically access a place, or can we? And that can definitely be based on prejudice. So you're absolutely right that and of course, for example, if people don't feel like they have love and belonging, they may not feel like they want to even care about these things. But what I'm talking about, so you're absolutely right, and I don't want to minimize that. So you're absolutely right, and so, prejudice can be something that can affect our the most basic things. What I want people to take away from this is not to have this not to be a slave to this as a rigid way of thinking, but rather to think about that on a more broad conceptual level, that we need to make sure that we are meeting these needs for ourselves before we can really do work with clients. Because doing social work, right, is a higher level function than physiological needs for ourselves. So I want you to think about it for yourselves. So I completely agree with you, and thank you for making that point. Anybody have any questions or reflections about this? Anyone else? So it's really it's really important that we think about this, and oftentimes we don't. Oftentimes, has anyone here ever just fit in? How many people here actually are working in the field in some way, working in human services in some way? So quite a few. Anybody ever? I mean, I've done this myself. Ever fit in that one more client, right? Because they're in crisis, right? Or we give of ourselves, which is really important, but we have to make sure that we have something of ourselves to give. And we're going to talk more about that. So I just wanted to think about Maslow's hierarchy as a way of thinking about safety. And so this piece about safety really being the foundation, that we need to have a base of safety for ourselves so that we can create safety for our clients. And like I said, hopefully, the reason I showed the Superman clip is because I think it's so vivid. It's just the thing of Superman swooping him up. And that self-care, wellness, and overall safety are crucial to social work practice. Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I don't know if has anyone ever read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Yeah. So one of them he talks about is called sharpen the saw. That you say we have to sharpen the saw. And sharpening the saw means, if you just keep cutting wood and you keep cutting wood, but you never sharpen the saw, at some point you can't, the saw is dull. And so when you think about, for example, one of the things that's really important, we're going to go in a minute into a role play to demonstrate this, but let me pose a question to you. What is our primary tool in social work? What are our tools? What tools do we use in social work? Yes?
Listening.
Listening?
Our knowledge and experience.
Yes? What else? Yes?
Empathy.
Empathy? What else?
Evidence-based.
Right. What else?
Evidence-based.
Evidence-based practice. Thank you. Were you paid to say that? What else? Any others? Let me ask you a question. Can you put these tools in a little box at the end of the day, and you bring them home, and then you put them in the drawer? Where do these tools live? Where do they reside? Yeah. So really, when you think about when you think about, let's say, a plumber, right? And you think about a plumber and what is a plumber's primary tools, right? A plumber has whatever they have, I don't know, a wrench, right? Different, a snake. A plumber can, at the end of the day, take their tools, put them in a thing, leave them in the truck, and go home, right? As social workers, our tool, right? Our tools are really ourselves, right? How many of you have had the idea of use of self? You talked about use of self? No. So, professional use of self means that we use ourselves as a vehicle to help other people get better. But we are the tool, right? So, yes?
I think the thing that's important to remember, I'm sorry for the
No.
is that because I was thinking about it before when you were saying, how do we keep safety? What does safety look like? I think safety looks like remembering we're not the only tool. And so we have these other community resources to meet these different needs of the client, and we're not holding ourselves responsible to do all of that at the end of the day.
That's very important, right? That we don't take on the world on our shoulders. Absolutely. That we don't have to bear it all by ourselves. Harold Kushner, in the book when bad things happen to good, why do bad things happen to good people? And one of the things he talks about is how they've done research where they ask someone to put their hand in a bucket of ice water, and they demonstrate, how long that person can keep their hand in a bucket of ice water. And it turns out whatever it is, it's 60 seconds or 90 seconds. And then what they did is they had someone else put their hand in a bucket of ice water next to them. And anybody guess what happened? You can do it longer. How much longer do you think, percentage-wise? About 2 times, about double the amount. People can, now why is that? Yes?
I don't know if this is the answer you're looking for, but it could be a sense of competition.
That's a great one, yeah. Like, I'm not gonna, there's no way you said a sense of competition. You're like, there's no way I'm gonna be the first one to take my hand out. That's one possibility. I guess the social worker in me thinks of another one, but yes. Yes?
Just that you're not by yourself, you're going through it together.
Right, that you're not alone, that you are not alone. There was a wonderful, there was a radio host who had, Mother Teresa came to the United States, and she agreed to come on a show, and he said, listen, I'd like to get you something. Can I get you something? I'd like to get you a gift. Of course, what does Mother Teresa really want? What are you going to get her, right? A diamond ring and so a diamond necklace. So she said, I don't want anything. He said, there's got to be something. There's got to be something you want. And she said, here, if you want to do something for me, here's what I'd like you to do if you want to give me a gift. I want you to go at 3 o'clock in the morning to the most, to the place, the worst part of town. I'd like you to find someone who thinks they're alone and convince them they're not. She said, that's what you can get me. And we ourselves, sometimes as social workers, we get into trouble, right, when we start to feel like we are out there by ourselves. And we should never be out there by ourselves. And that's a big part of hopefully what you leave with here tonight, is that you're not by yourself, because you're gonna hear a lot from people about all the support and resources that you do have and the importance of using them. What I'd like to do now is actually, I'd like to go into, we have a role play that was done. It's a really great role play by our field committee. And I'd like you to watch this role play. I think it's about maybe 5 or 6 minutes long. And we'll have a discussion about it, but I'd like you to watch this. And this role play takes place in, I believe it's it's a partial hospitalization program. And so I'd like you to watch this and just think about some of the things that we're talking about, some of these themes about safety. And then, like I said, we'll have a discussion about it afterwards.
So this is our second time that we've had a chance to meet, and you're getting settled here in the program.
Indeed.
Indeed. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the idea of safety and sort of our safety philosophy here in the department. And I guess my first general thing to talk to you about is sort of just being here for just the little time that you've had and the classwork that you've had so far. What's your general idea of safety, or what sort of, when you think about safety in social work and in human services, what are some of the things that come to mind?
I would say minimizing risk, being aware of where you are relative to people you're working with, relative to your coworkers, making sure you're able to communicate with coworkers as well as clients effectively at all times. I heard a little bit about the policy here with being able to work with team members in the event of any issues. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. And I think exactly what you just said about this idea of sort of situational awareness, kind of knowing when you walk into the building, when you walk into an office or to a group room, kind of what the feel is a big part of it. But the real core, I think, of our philosophy around safety is this concept of we work as a team. We work, nobody here needs to make decisions on their own or handle situations, tough situations by themselves. So Our main philosophy here is, if there is a situation that feels that could be brewing or that might be leading you to feel either unsafe or that the situation is getting out of hand, you immediately have a team of 4 other clinicians down the hall. And I think it's also important, to remember too that this is a blanket-wide policy or blanket-wide philosophy. So even if I have a seasoned social worker that's been working in the field for 30 years in that same situation where they're feeling like something's not right here, I need help, they would activate the same procedure. They would come down and get help. So I don't see a difference between being an intern and being someone who's worked in the field for a long time. It's all the same for everybody.
Sure. And with the group process, when we're trying to help de-escalate a situation, is it possible to, if need be, have the group itself move if one person is kind of struggling and doesn't really want to ruin themselves in the situation?
Yeah, it's a good question because groups are a little tricky in the sense that if we've got one member of the group that's having a hard time, and that's the way that we kind of look at it, and a lot of times in treatment programs, not so much that the person's dangerous, but they're having a hard time. They're having maybe symptoms or an internal process that's leading them to feel that they're having a difficult time. But if they are having a hard time, yeah, our idea is if it can't be worked out in the group, either that individual with the assistance of the staff would be let out or brought to a place where they can check in with staff, where they can feel safe. Or if that's not possible, if the person's refusing to leave, then the group leaves. But it's important for the group process that it's often at that point, if it can't be worked out in the group, then it needs to be between the individual and the staff. Sure. And then the big overall philosophy is that we want everybody here to feel safe, not only the staff, but the clients. We want them to feel like this is an environment of safety. And what we hope is that in creating an environment like that, we avoid problems. We avoid situations from getting out of control.
That makes sense.
Yeah. One thing that I think that as starting to go over with you some of our safety policies here, it's occurred to me, and I think I said this a couple of times when we first met, was that it dawned on me that we haven't had any big emergencies here in quite a long time. And I think that speaks a little bit to the idea of the philosophy of how we try to create an environment of safety, both for staff and for the clients. So, I think that has led us to not have any big instance of problems, and I will constantly knock on wood, but if you can be proactive, and I think that's exactly what you said before, be proactive, have this knowledge base about safety ahead of time, that's 75% of usually de-escalating a situation that could be hard.
Yeah. Very good.
So Jeremy, let's talk a little bit about, this is, you're not new to human services, you're not new necessarily to the field, so you're coming to us with a lot of experience of working in more home situations and out in the field, and this will be new to you to come into more of an office situation and to a situation where you're working more with a team of people. I'm wondering, how do you feel like that's going to be different when you think about safety or when you think about dealing with hard situations? How do you think that's going to be different for you?
I'm expecting it's going to be a very different experience. I'm used to going to private homes, knocking on the door unannounced and trying to make my way into people's lives and see if there's anything we can do to help out. This is a very different ballgame here, and I got to be cognizant of not thinking that because this is a secure atmosphere and we're working here in a facility that because I have this experience out in the real world.
Right, the real world, right, yeah.
It's going to set me up for what I need to anticipate here. So I'd like to get a little more insight into what policies you guys have in place here, and for instance, if someone was working, even if it's not me, one-on-one with clients, how you would recommend that they go about the physical placement of themselves in the room if there's a crisis situation, what the policy is here for reaching out for assistance. I really have to start from square one because this is a new ball game for me.
Right, and when you're working in a home environment, there's a little bit of you're probably a little bit more on as far as on guard or more aware. Here, walking into this environment, it's different. So you have to be able to kind of think about exactly what you're going to say as far as placing yourself. You know, when we do individual meetings here, which we do, whether it's an assessment or if it's a one-on-one, we do have to be aware of the room that we're in, particularly if we feel like the client might be upset or if they're having a hard time. So thinking about where to place yourself, making sure that you've got access to the door, that you're able to get yourself out to safety if the situation should happen to escalate. Also here what we've found is that it's important to make sure that the client knows how to get out. Sometimes it's harder for them when they feel trapped and they feel like that they need to get out. So I'm a big advocate of making sure that I know where the exit is, but if someone's having a hard time, I also let them know where the exit is. Not to tell them to get out, but just to let them know that they've got options. Since we're not a locked facility and people are here voluntarily, we don't stop people. We don't restrain people or bar their exits. So sometimes it's important, and sometimes it's actually helpful to de-escalate a situation when people know that they've got the freedom to leave. There may be consequences, there may be things that we have to ensure to make sure that they're safe, but people can leave. And that often kind of deflates the situation a bit when they know that they've got options.
Yeah.
But it's important for us to remember that we've got options too.
True.
I think the other philosophy too is that despite the fact that we work here as a team, we also don't want to feel like we're ganging up on people. I don't think anyone likes to be surrounded by people or feel trapped or anything like that. So we want to work as a team, but we try to communicate, you know, if there is a situation where a client is having a hard time, who's going to be the primary person to do the intervention, to sit down and talk with them. Often we'll meet with them in pairs. So who are the two people that are going to try to help de-escalate the situation? But then we also figure out, okay, who's the person that's going to stay outside the room and kind of help monitor. You know, if it sounds like it's getting worse, then that person could activate our security department or have help come if need be. Who's the person that if we, you know, need to involve the medical director is going to contact her. So we have sort of a hierarchy, or we break up into roles, I should say, of who's going to do what in a situation. And again, it can be really anyone on the team, and we try to keep that flexibility so that everybody knows how to handle a situation, everybody knows how to call security, everybody knows how to get in touch with the doctor if we need to.
Okay. Another question I had for you was, what if there are concerns that a client might be impaired or under the influence? What was the policy for that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because since we also do substance abuse work here, we always have to be cognizant of it. Fortunately and luckily, and I'll knock on wood again, that doesn't come up too much, because we try to, first of all, our first level of safety is to create an environment where people can come to us if they feel like they're going to use or if they have used. So we don't try to have it so restrictive that people feel like they have to hide it. There are the times when people do come either under the influence of alcohol and drugs. And for a number of reasons, including safety, but also just clinical responsibility, we can't have someone in treatment for that day. So if I suspect that someone is under the influence, we meet with them. If we think it's alcohol, we meet with them as a team. Again, 2 people meet with the person separately away from everyone else. We use a breathalyzer where we can get a blood alcohol level and really assess if this person is able to get themselves home, or do they need help getting home. Again, it's very rare that someone shows up under the influence and they're out of control. Again, I'll knock on wood. We're fortunate in that. What I'm more concerned about in safety is, okay, can this person safely get home, and are they going to be safe once they get home? So once we've judged whether or not they're under the influence, then we create a safety plan.
Okay.
And that might mean calling family, friends, someone to safely get them home. Or do they need to go to the emergency room? You know, do they need to be medically cleared? You know, fortunately, in being in a medical setting like this, we have access to an emergency room that has security, so that if we need to make sure that someone's safe, either because they don't feel safe with themselves or they don't feel safe around other people, 99% of the time we can get them to our own emergency room where there are a whole set of safety protocols that are designed to help keep people safe and treat them in a way that's going to be appropriate for them. This whole conversation about safety and our safety, client safety is ongoing. We never stop really talking about it. I mean, we emphasize this a lot at the very beginning, just like we emphasize fire drills, how to prepare for an internal disaster, fire, all that stuff. But not like a lot of other policies, this is one that we have an ongoing conversation with because we always have situations come up where we feel, do we need to assess this person for safety? So it's a term you'll hear a lot, but we're all constantly reassessing our philosophy and our policies on safety. So I want you to feel like you can come to me or any member of the staff if you ever feel like you're in a situation that doesn't feel right, that doesn't feel safe. We frequently will meet with people as teams, whereas where most people would think you do that individually. So if we need to assess someone, we can do it as a team. We can do it in an open area that feels less restrictive for people. We actually have portable emergency buttons that if we need to take that into a session, we can. And again, in 15 years, nobody's ever had to push that button. So
I'll knock on it for you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So this is an ongoing conversation. So I invite everybody on staff, interns, staff, everyone, for us to continue to talk about this, both individually and as a team, about how we can keep creating this as a safe environment for the clients and for staff in a way that's kind of proactive, that avoids it ever budding to an emergency or to an unsafe situation. So we'll talk about this in staff meetings, we'll talk about this in supervision. But again, I just really reinforce and hammer home that idea that this is a team environment, and use your team.
Will do.
Okay.
Thank you, Baxter.
Thank you.
That role play really is, there's a lot of rich stuff in there. So I saw people writing things down, and obviously we've been talking about this beginning of safety. I think they did an excellent job of really illustrating a lot of points. And I would love to hear what people, any thoughts or reflections. I mean, we'll get more specific about some things, but what are some things that you saw in here that you think were good in terms of safety-informed social work practice? Yes?
He kept coming back to, you're not alone, there's a team behind you. This person down the hall, whether you're new or old, we're all new. So that reinforces the ability to ask for help if needed.
Right, so he kept saying, Baxter kept saying that you're not alone, right? That you don't ever need to feel like you're just stuck out there by yourself, right? And that's one of the things too, that as you go out in the field, no matter what, you should not be alone, right? That you should not be alone. Thank you. What else? What are some other things in terms of safety-informed practice that you saw in there? There really was a lot. Yes?
I think that the director, the supervisor gave the intern the space to not feel like he had to be perfect and to not feel like he had to have all the answers.
Right.
So he said, this is okay if you're in a team or, if you're in a group session and you don't know the answer, come down and bring. And then also that was like emotional safety, and then physical safety, that if you're dealing with a crisis, someone's going to be right outside the door, or if someone's inebriated or intoxicated, there's protocol that we have so touch them.
Right, absolutely, I agree with you. That's right. So that we're talking about, right, that there are protocol, there are people behind you. Here's who those people are, and like you said, that's another piece. This is a big piece too about safety that's really important. Is that that we having the conversation, that we don't have to, that it's okay to be vulnerable, right? He did a really good job of really validating that and making it a culture. One of the things that when I was at DCF, one of the things that we talked about was creating a culture of safety. That we wanted to make it okay for people instead of sort of this old school model where it wasn't okay to be concerned about your own safety. And if you were concerned about your safety, that meant there was something wrong, right? And what we want to do is the opposite, that actually, safety-informed social work practice means if you're not thinking about your safety, then something's wrong, So really turning that. What else? What are some other ones? Yes.
Well, I thought Jeremy, very quickly had some interesting answers, which was sort of not ones that we necessarily discussed when you opened it up today, such as minimizing the risk and being aware of where you are in the situation. But I also could really, I felt something he said happened today with our group and in our field, and when Jeremy kept saying, this is all very new to me, it's different. And when the 3 interns I was with met with our field supervisor today, we expressed our feelings, and he said, yes, you're all in an identity crisis right now, and that's the way you should be.
Yeah, this is all very new, absolutely. I remember, it's funny, I was listening to that too, and I was thinking about my very first home visit when I was with the Department of Children, DSS back then, now DCF. And I remember doing my first home visit, and I was like, oh my God, I have to go knock on someone's door. I'm going to, I can't do this. I can't possibly do this. And then, by year 10, it becomes second nature. But both things you have to think about safety for both ways, right? One way, right, it's a new experience. On the other hand, one of the things Baxter was saying too, which is clear, is that no matter how long, one of the things too is no matter how long we've been doing something, that we should be mindful of our safety. What else? Yes.
You mentioned the idea of being proactive, planning ahead.
Yeah.
Not just thinking now, like the weekend, and so it's great, and that could go into the environment, how to set up the environment, how you approach the individual, verbal communication and physical communication.
Right, exactly. I agree. And what's nice about that too is one of the things that didn't happen in this video that I think this really models a very good way of talking about safety. One of the things that didn't happen is there wasn't a conversation about, well, let me tell you some of the war stories, right? That's not safety, right? That's just further traumatizing ourselves, and we don't need to do that. What it's really about, safety is about, right? Planning. What do we do? And you can see that obviously they do a very good job because, like he said, we really haven't had an incident in a while. But that doesn't mean that we're not having the conversation. That in fact, probably because we're having the conversation is why we minimize the incidents, right? It was one of the things that he said. Yeah. What else? Any other? There really was a lot in this video. Anything else that jumped out at people? One thing I'm going to talk about in just a moment that we're going to transition into that I really want to say is that Jeremy was used to one type of practice setting, right? And so he was experienced, but he had experience in a different kind of practice setting. And so he was having a conversation about, walking into, I know what it's like to walk into, right? I know what it's like to walk into one type of place, but that doesn't mean that I know everything that there is, right? And I'll let you in on a secret, and this is being videotaped. I don't know everything that there is, right? And that we shouldn't feel like we have to know everything that there is. And if we go into a new practice setting, that we need to be thinking about maybe some different things about safety. Yes?
I also am going to start working with Baxter on Tuesday.
Oh, there you go.
So one of the things that I've noticed in the whole conversation with time with him is that unlike Jeremy, I have no experience in the field whatsoever.
Yes.
And he's been very supportive of the idea that to start from scratch too. So there's the other half that isn't in this video because Jeremy has the experience he has, but the idea that you can start from scratch and build up from that too.
Absolutely right. And that safety is not about, no one can be so experienced that we experience our way out of safety, right? No one's like, I did safety. I did that 5 years ago, right? So remember that when when you leave here, I don't want anybody going, yeah, I did safety with Doug. I already did safety. I got it, right? No. I got my certificate, right? Exactly. Yes.
I just wanted to add, going back to the original question of what is safety in practice, that for me that doesn't just include issues of our safety and our colleagues, but also the safety of clients.
Thank you. So you're talking about, safety also includes client safety. Very good point.
The agency's located, you know, what people who take the bus, you know, is it safe, is there lighting?
Well, that's a wonderful segue. You're talking about thinking about lighting and right, exactly. Safety can be so many things. I actually just want to share with you real quick, just before we're getting ready to do this training, and one of the questions they asked me is, you know, should we tape the wires to the floor? And part of me was like, you know, I'll tape the wires to the floor, I'm fine. But then, you know, part of me thought about taking this giant flying, you know, trip during my safety, you know. That's part of safety too, right? So sometimes when we think about safety, you're absolutely right. The environment, client safety, yes?
You were saying when knocking on a client's door that it's okay not to know everything.
Yeah.
What I have found in knocking on a client's door and going into the home for the first time, clients are very intimidated.
Yeah.
And they think, well, my impression, at times, certain clients feel that we know everything because we're a person of authority, and we're coming in through the door whether we work for the state or whatnot. And so, and I've had clients say, well, you tell me, you know. Right. So it's, you know.
So we don't know, as you're talking about when we walk into, you know, if we're working in an in-home setting and we're going into people's homes, that they may see us in such a position of authority, right? That they see us as knowing everything, and that and then that could create its own safety issues. So this is a good point about the different types of practice settings. And maybe we can just say a little bit about, I'd like to say a little bit about what types of practice settings there are. What types of practice settings are some of you doing your field work in? What are some different types of settings that you find yourselves? Yes? I'm sorry?
Respite.
Respite, right, thank you. Yes?
Primary care.
Primary care, excellent, yes?
Hospital.
Hospital, great. What else? What are some other ones that people are working in? Yes?
Inpatient detox.
Inpatient detox, yep. What else? Yes?
Domestic violence visitation.
Domestic violence visitation, certainly safety is an issue, right? What else? Yes?
High school.
High school, someone else said school, elementary school. Yes?
I'm in a 6-month residential program with women who have substance abuse issues.
6-month residential program?
And also, some of the children live there also, so.
Wow, so they're with their children. Yeah. So, are there some similarities of issues of safety across all those practice settings? Would there be some, yeah. Would there be some pretty big differences as well? There would be, right? And so, so thinking about these different safety considerations, and as someone pointed out too, that some of the safety considerations are a physical environment, right? Sometimes we're working in places where maybe there could be fire hazards, or there could be, you know, we have to think about certain things, our physical location. I gave the example of, you know, taping the wires down as an example. But we have to think about the different safety considerations across different practice settings. I want to start moving on, but maybe I just want to say one or two more things about this just to make the point clear. What would be some safety considerations that would be specific to a practice setting? Anybody think of, yes?
Well, I'm in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And so I can't work in place downstairs.
Right.
Or like in an elevator.
Right.
And I also have to be much more aware of like some of my own safety because I can't, if you come at me,
Right.
I can't defend myself.
I won't come at you, by the way. Yes. No, but I agree with you.
I am very, very strong, but you have the height and that sort of.
So being in a wheelchair and then having to be aware of your right. So not just the practice setting, but ourselves in the practice setting. I mean, this is like HBSE, right? This is human behavior in the social environment. This is being aware of ourselves in our environment. I mean, it's all those skills that we learn. Yes.
I worked at the needle exchange for some years, and one environment was needle sticks. So you had to be mindful when you're going into a shooting gallery that if you pick something up, you might stick yourself.
So being careful about needle sticks which is something that you probably wouldn't be worrying about if you're in an elementary school, right? You'd have a different set of issues. So I really appreciate that. I just wanted to give some examples of some different practice considerations. And I thank you all very much for being such active participants. So this is what we talked about, the challenges, similarities. What I want to do now is I'd like to bring Judith McMunn up and to talk about 10 tips. And I just want to say that Judith was actually my supervisor and manager at DCF for many years. And she is a wonderful supervisor and manager, and she always emphasized safety when we went out.
So to start with, we have to think about the way we dress, and we have to dress sensibly. We need to avoid provocative clothing, high-heeled shoes, especially working in the community. If you're unsure about appropriate dress, absolutely you should discuss that with your field supervisor. And when I started in DCF as an ongoing worker, I did ongoing work for 16 years, and I know that I loved nice shoes. I've always liked shoes, but going up in a triple-decker, visiting a home maybe that had safety issues, bad stairways, and maybe questionable cleanliness in a home, it was certainly not an appropriate way to be dressed. So we have to think about those things, and if you're unclear, the best thing to do is discuss with whoever your supervisor is what's an appropriate way to dress for your setting. You want to always make sure your cell phone's fully charged. You don't know when you might need to make a call into your field supervisor. You want to make sure that it's fully charged and ready to go when you head out. Make sure you discuss with your field instructor whatever available information there might be about your client before you meet them. And I know through the years I've met folks who felt like they'd like to meet their client without having sort of looked at the record because they wanted to sort of start fresh with folks. But in terms of thinking of safety, that's not really advisable. And again, this depends on your setting, what information is available. But in a lot of settings, if the case is being handed on from one worker to another, it might make sense to talk to the person who previously worked with the family or the individual, depending on what the setting is. And if we can go out with as much information as we can, it certainly is going to make us safer in the interaction. Another safety tip is to make sure that your time in your session is balanced to allow for both hearing and acknowledging your client's concerns and feelings as well as your own agenda. And that, again, of course, differs in an outpatient setting. The client's going to certainly run the agenda, but oftentimes in other settings like at DCF is going out with an agenda to talk about safety in the home, and one of the sure ways to get off to a bad start with clients is if I go out there with my agenda and I power through my agenda and I say, oh my gosh, I have to go now, I'll talk to you next month, it's not really going to set a stage for a good relationship with that person or with that family. And in my experience, most of the great work that gets done for me in social work, it comes out of the relationship I have with that individual or that family.
Oh,
so if I've got to make sure that while I may go out there and I have,
I'm just going to steal these things and hand them out
Oh, okay.
real quick while you're talking. I'll hand these out to people. Yep.
So I have to make sure, while I may have an agenda I have to cover with a family or an individual, that I save time and let them talk about what their concerns are, what their needs are, what their feelings are about what I've talked about. So I think that's just a really important piece. Another part is to maintain appropriate boundaries. Clarification about boundaries would be a great topic for discussion with your field supervisor or your faculty liaison, your professors, classmates. Boundaries, and I know someone earlier in our discussion tonight brought them up. It's just really important that we have boundaries. And I know one of the things I remember learning in social work school was if the session or discussion was more about me than the person I was meeting with, probably had to check my boundaries. So it needs to be about the work that we're supposed to be doing. So another key one for me is paying attention to a feeling if I feel like I'm unsafe in a session or if I'm unsafe in a home visit. It's so important to check in with that, to pay attention to that and not ignore it. And it may mean if you're feeling unsafe that it's time to end the session or the meeting. And then it's very important to take that again back to your supervisors and discuss that. Very important to practice universal precautions. I'm not going to go into a discussion of that. The information is usually available. You can certainly go online to the CDC and look up what universal precautions are, but very important that we practice those. So in this day and age of technology, we have to be mindful of the personal information that we might inadvertently expose through social media, even just sort of bumper stickers on your car, clothes, cell phone message, all these things can have meanings for the folks that we work with that we need to be reflective about. I'm going to move on now to some in-office tips. We want to make sure, I think that this is something Baxter talked about in the video, you want to make sure that your client's not seated between you and the door, if that's at all possible. We want to make sure you know whether you're in someone's home or you're in an office, where the closest door is and how to get out there safely if you need to. If you have a safety concern about a particular client, you want to make sure you discuss that with your field supervisor. And then it's very important to have a plan about how you're going to proceed. Some of those considerations are like if you're going to meet with someone that you maybe have to talk about something difficult with, you might want to make sure if you're in an office setting that you're in an office that's near the receptionist, or you're going to have somebody else kind of keeping an ear out to make sure things are going okay in your session. It's certainly, you don't want to be meeting with clients who are under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and different settings, of course, have different protocols for this, so this will be a very important thing you want to make sure you touch base with your field supervisor about. But this is something else that Baxter touched on, both in terms of the ethics of making sure that you're going to want to do treatment with people that are sober and really available to do that, and also for your own personal safety. And then just being, wanting to be sure that your space that you're meeting in is free of hazards as possible. When you're out in the community, you want to have your identification with you. That's really important. That's also another piece that kind of speaks to the safety of the client. You want to model that you're going to let them know, especially the first time you meet them, who you really are and that you have the authority to be there. Make sure that the office, if you're out in the community, knows where you are and when you will return. And that's another piece that's just so important, that folks know where you are. If you're not returning to the office, and especially if you have a concern about a particular visit in the community, you want to make sure you arrange to check in with either a coworker or a supervisor so that folks know that you concluded that visit safely. You want to make sure you have a full tank of gas, especially if you're not really sure where you're going. Be sure you have a car in good working order. Make sure you have a correct and concise address, and that seems very simple, but it does happen very often that we get addresses that aren't accurate. My practice used to be, if I had a home visit, I'd make sure I checked out, if I was able to, with the client, that was indeed the correct address that was in the record. Make sure your cell phone's fully charged. Sit close to the door as feasible in the circumstance. And I think one of the last things I want to talk about are pets. And, you know, folks have animals, cats, dogs. If you're uncomfortable with them or the pet is aggressive, and I've actually met some pretty aggressive cats in the years I did home visits, it's certainly appropriate to ask folks to put their pets away, to put them in another room while you visit, so that you're not having to be exposed to an aggressive pet or if you're allergic to pets, it's certainly appropriate to ask folks. And I think that the last thing I want to say about sort of generally about safety is the whole idea that it's already been mentioned about how important it is when we go out, whether it's in an office setting or in the field, that we have a plan, that we know where we're going, that we know what we want to cover, that we understand as much as we can about a client, and that, you know, just to echo how very important it is that our own safety is important, and as I think it was Mary who brought up the importance of that same time that's going to echo back to the client that their safety is important as well, that whole sort of parallel process there. So those are my safety tips, and I think they've been handed out, and I thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you. Now we're going to talk about, Dr. Walsh is going to come up and talk about wellness and resilience and how that's built into the program. So just to say, you know, wellness is a state of condition of being in good physical and mental health, and the resilience, the positive capacity to withstand stressors and cope with trauma. And I'd like to have Dr. Walsh come up and just say a bit about wellness is a part of this program, and I also want to say that you were actually my field advisor for my own curriculum. So,
Hi, I'm Kathy Walsh, and I won't meet you until next year, or maybe 2 years from now, because I teach the advanced practice classes. But I was already really encouraged when I heard some of the things that you offered to this discussion, because it does suggest that you've already begun to think and talk about, hopefully in your classes, but also in your field agencies, some of these concepts. But the main message that we want to, you to leave here with tonight, well, there are a couple of main messages. One is that safety is really part of wellness, and wellness involves self-care. So what you need to be thinking about in terms of your clients and their resilience and their well-being, we also need to be thinking about ourselves and our own well-being. And I'm just wondering if there are any examples that any of you have where self-care or wellness has come up in your class or in your field practicum. Because we all know how social workers put wellness and self-care right front and center every day.
This actually surprised me, but it actually came up in my field placement interview. It was one of the last questions, and she said, "What do you do for self-care?" And I was like, "What?" I almost didn't get it at first, and then I was like, "Oh, she's interested in how I take care of myself." And I thought it actually really attracted me to working there.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and we hope that if it isn't already a universal topic of conversation, that it becomes a universal topic of conversation, because you remember are, the directors of your own learning as well. So it's really important for you to be bringing these issues to the forefront, again, in supervision, in your classroom settings. How about any classes? Anybody have an example? Well, that's because you'll be getting to that topic right away, I'm sure, in your field seminars. But what we really do want to have you be thinking about as part of your classwork and your field work is how you are taking care of yourself in all these different aspects.
All the professors have impressed upon students the value of taking care of yourself, and if you're overdoing it, to let them know. And they're very flexible with that. So.
Well, good. That is good to hear. Another example.
I was just going to say, in general practice, we did talk about self-care and how to de-stress and things that we do to kind of de-stress. So that was talked.
Okay, excellent. And the topic came up a little bit earlier about, safety and how we learn about safety in our agencies. But we have to remember that our social work practice is informed by our own life experiences and our own past experiences and present lifestyles, as well as what we learn in class. So we've all lived in environments and visited environments where we have to think about safety. And so we're not just learning this for the first time, hopefully. This is something that really you can call upon from other experiences in your life, other experts in your life besides just your instructors. But peers are very useful as well. So you will be learning about more self-care and wellness as part of enhancing worker resilience. And I've been practicing since 1978, and I can guarantee you the idea of worker resilience, we barely had a term to describe client resilience in those days. The research was just beginning, and it's taken a long time for us to get to the place where we have an evidence base for self-care and worker resilience. But that is emerging, and hopefully some of you will be contributing to that literature by perhaps developing programs for worker resilience in the agencies in which you work. But it is definitely something that we are needing to pay more attention to, and thank goodness. So in your field settings, you'll be talking about in supervision. In your field seminars, this will be a required topic for discussions, both in the foundation practicum seminars and certainly in the advanced seminars, and hopefully in practice classes. But what you've learned about client well-being in your HB classes, we hope you are taking and applying to your own lives as well. We all need adequate sleep, we all need adequate nutrition, we all need adequate exercise in order to maintain a healthy self. And so those are the kinds of things that we want you to be thinking about when you think about your own self-assessment and your own self-awareness. But when we talk about what specific assignments in class, for example, in our advanced child practice class tonight, I'm here because we do have a guest speaker who's an in-home family therapist who is presenting to my class tonight, and she's talking about safety in the context of that work as well. But in preparation for that talk, students had a chapter in Nancy Boyd Franklin's book, Reaching Out, which is about home-based intervention. And there is a chapter that addresses worker safety with many of the tips that Judith just talked about, as well as some additional ones like don't drive such an expensive car that, you know, it might be a temptation in certain, you know, neighborhoods or environments. So, so we do try and give you the context for that kind of self-care and safety practice through the literature that exists as well. So again, you are in charge of your own learning, and if these topics and concerns and strategies and practices aren't being reviewed, or you haven't had the opportunity to discuss them as much as you feel that you need, then you need to take the initiative. Because really, we hope that we all are in this work together to support and nurture each other and really develop the most proficient practitioners that we can. So we faculty are invested in trying to respond to student needs. And that is why we do encourage you to bring your questions and concerns to the faculty. This training safety came about, yes, because NASW has now, managed to pass legislation that requires agencies and schools to provide safety training. But we, as a field advisory committee, really talked about this at length and decided that we really wanted to present this in the context of wellness and resilience. And so we've expanded the mandate for ourselves to include that as well. So we hope that you really will bring your questions, your concerns, that you will have opportunities to share your self-care and safety practices with each other. Some of us in practice classes and in seminars do ask students to present self-care strategies that you have found to be effective, and that's a way that we can all enhance each other's well-being and support all of our own learning. So please do take the initiative and really let us know where there are gaps or areas of concern for us to address in the curriculum as well. And we do have two representatives sitting here in the room. Alana and Dwarje are representatives to the curriculum committee, so they serve as a vehicle for students to bring to the curriculum committee concerns about what may be missing or what may be needed. So that's another vehicle to address these as well. So.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kathy. Thank you. So what I want to do is, as we get ready to close here, I want to do a grounding exercise with you. And anybody know what I mean by grounded? What does it mean to be grounded? Yeah, centered, present, exactly. So I'm going to do a, coming back to grounding is really important. In the work I do, a lot of clinical social work these days, and it's really important. It's a really important thing, to be grounded. And so I want to do an exercise with you. We said we want this to be a positive thing. I just wanted to share with you, this is something that you can actually do in your car, not while you're driving. Please don't do it while you're driving. But you could do this, in your car where you're parked. I mean, you can do this. It only takes, it's something from, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of HeartMath, but HeartMath is an organization that's been studying the physiology of the heart and the connection to emotion. And they have something called the quick coherence technique, and I'm just going to go ahead and do it with you tonight, do it with you now. And what I'd like to do is, there's 3 parts to this. There's bringing awareness to your heart, and then heart breathing, and then bringing in gratitude. So what I'd like to do is, if you can all just kind of get into a comfortable sitting position, right? And what I'd like you to do is first to sort of bring awareness to your heart. So I'd like you to actually put your hand over your heart, right? Exactly. Kind of get centered there and sort of notice that. What I'd like you to do now is actually close your eyes for a moment. And I'd like you to imagine yourself breathing in and out through that area in your heart. I want you to imagine like a window to your heart. And I want you to breathe in and out maybe a little bit more deeply than you normally would. And I'd like you to just kind of notice, sort of breathe into that heart area and breathe out through that heart area. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to bring up an image or a moment or a memory that brings up gratitude for you. A moment, something that brings up love and gratitude. Could be anything, could be person, could be whatever comes to mind, but something that you're deeply grateful for in your life, an image or memory. And I'd like you to continue to sort of focus your energy on your heart and your breathing while you bring up that memory and hold that. Great, and now go ahead and you can open your eyes and exhale. I'm curious, does anybody feel any difference in your body? Do you notice any difference in sort of your state of being? Yeah? What do you notice? You feel a little... Yeah, if you, I really recommend it. The quick coherence technique, the idea of being in coherence sort of means that our mind and body and everything and our heart is synchronized. And what's wonderful about it is practicing this is a great way. It only takes a minute or less than a minute. And it changes the physiology of your body when you're under stress. And it literally changes, it changes your body from releasing, when you're under stress, releasing cortisol. When you do this, it changes the physiology of your body to activate more love and gratitude. So it's just a nice way to sort of, something that you can do, just a little something, and I just wanted to go ahead and bring that in here tonight. So again, just to say as an overview, safety is the foundation of social work practice. I think we've covered that. Safety includes resilience and wellness. It has to be part of an ongoing process, not a one-time event. So yeah, nobody's going to leave here and say that, I went to the meeting, right? And that I'm done. This training is the beginning of the conversation. Good social work practice is about reaching out in collaboration, and that we get in trouble when we work in isolation. And just to say that, the piece about reaching out in collaboration for many of you, just to say for myself, many of you here will one day be doing many things like, for example, like I said, Judith was my supervisor and manager. Terry was one of my professors. Kathy Walsh was a professor and field advisor for me. You will see that as you stay in this field, you will see, and as you grow in this field, that there are many people that are here to support you, and you're in a great program that really values your safety and well-being. I want to share with you a story. It's not a true story, but I want to share with you a story called The Cobbler's Boots that sort of illustrates the importance of everything we're talking about. There once was a cobbler who was an amazing everyone know what a cobbler is? There's we don't have them anymore, really, right? There once was a cobbler who fixed shoes, and he was an amazing cobbler. And he used to fix everyone's boots, and everyone had the most comfortable boots in the village. And one day, the cobbler started realizing, somebody pointed out, they said, hey, your boots are breaking. And the cobbler said, that's okay, I can still make boots, don't worry about it. And little by little, day by day, his boots started to rip. But the cobbler didn't have time to fix his boots because he was so busy fixing everyone else's boots. And in time, the cobbler started to limp because his feet hurt so much. And people said, please stop and fix your own boots. And he said, I can't because everyone else needs boots. And what are they going to do? So I'm okay, I can still make boots. And then one day, of course, what ended up happening is the cobbler was in so much pain that he couldn't fix anyone else's boots. And in time, everyone in the village was limping because the cobbler didn't fix his boots. So I know you know where that's going, right? We have to fix our own boots, and it's really important. And I know all of you are here because you really love the social work profession and you want to be great social workers. And this is really an important piece of what social work is. And I hope that I really appreciate all of your feedback today and your active participation. It really makes this training so much richer. And so I want to go ahead now and bring Terry back up here to talk about next steps of the training. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Doug. Let's give Doug a round of applause. Okay? Thanks so much. And also thanks to Judith McMunn from our Field Advisory Committee for coming. And even though Dr. Walsh has run off to her next class, we'll thank her too, right? And give yourself a round of applause. Some of you really took some risks tonight. You really allowed yourself to be vulnerable. And I want you to just take a moment as we're getting ready to finish for tonight and think about here's a question for you, how am I going to continue to develop safety-informed practice? Personally, in my internship, in my classes, and in my life outside of school. Now, you might decide to choose a few moments here before you leave to write some notes for yourself. You might think about this as you're walking across campus when you leave. You might think about it when you wake up tomorrow or 2 weeks from now. But all of those areas matter. And as we heard earlier, you are responsible for your education. Safety-informed practice. Take next steps. Each one of you, there will be next steps that will be different. For some folks, they will be the same. But it's important that you see this as a stepping point. That's our intention. And we thank you so much for all your participation, your willingness to be here with us at this time. And, you know, be well. Take good care of yourselves.